So in this video I'm going to be teaching you how to make smoked ribs, and they're going to be perfect every time. If you're planning on making these in the oven, do everything that I'm doing out in the smoker except just do it in the oven, and I'll tell you how to get some of that smoke flavor into it a little bit later on. So the first thing that we end up having to do is we have to end up making our dry rub. There's really no set measurement for each thing. It's what you like, but generally speaking this will work for most people. A few tablespoons of paprika, that's going to give it the nice red color. We're going to end up having some black pepper. We have some granulated onion, granulated garlic. I'm putting more garlic than onion. I've got a little bit of chili powder, not a whole lot. A touch of cayenne for some heat. This is seasoning salt right here, whatever brand you prefer. It just adds a little bit extra flavor to it. And we have some brown sugar here. Outside of the sugar and maybe the cayenne, a lot of this other stuff is going to be disappearing in the smoke. There's some people that will make a dry rub that's really convoluted. They add all sorts of stuff. But by the time that they're done smoking their ribs, you don't really taste too much of it because the smoke basically milds the flavor of these. And then some of it also ends up rendering off, right? So keep it simple. Don't go too crazy with all this stuff because you're not going to notice too much of a difference. A lot of times, salt and pepper, that's all you need. But in this case, something more traditional. I'm going to take this, I'm going to mix it all up, and I'm going to put it in a shaker. And then this dry rub is good for all sorts of different kinds of meats. It doesn't have to just be ribs. The brown sugar ends up having moisture in it, so it's going to want to kind of clump up. Ribs, room temperature. What I end up doing is I end up buying these when they are cheap, and then I throw them in the freezer, right? If you go out and you buy these when they're in season, so to speak, you're going to be spending a lot more on them, sometimes double, right? So just go out and try to buy as many of these as you can. When you see them on sale, throw them in the freezer, and you won't regret that. On the back is a membrane, and we need to get rid of it. There's a couple of ways you can do it. Usually a paper towel is enough. You want to get in between the bone and kind of get your finger up and underneath there, and then you just pull it off. Done. If you see excess fat on it, it's a good idea to end up removing it because a lot of the fat will not render off. Some of this fat doesn't render, right? And then so somebody's going to take a big bite of fat. Give that to your neighbor. Some people will put mustard on here, which is fine, okay? It does add a little bit of a binder to it. The only thing is it's not really necessary. There's usually enough moisture in the meat to hold on to the dry rub. And so I'm not going to end up using mustard. You can if you want. Once again, if you think that it's going to add to the flavor, well, maybe in an oven, but in a smoker, you're not going to really taste it afterwards. The smoker really does take a lot of the flavor of the dry rub and things out. And then even though it's called a rub, it's more of a pat, okay? We're trying to get this stuff to stick to it. We want to do it on the front and back. Okay. And we also want to make sure we get the sides. And then the dry rub is going to give us a nice crust, okay? Now, the more paprika you put in it, the redder it's going to be. When I get ready to put this in the smoker, what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it together like that, okay? And then that pushes that meat together like that. And you're going to have a much better rib, okay? If you just kind of throw it out like that, it'll cook and everything will be fine, but you're going to have a much better result if you push it together like this. We're going to be setting the temperature of this 260 degrees, but it's not going to stay there, okay? That is to get it started. And then we don't want to put anything inside the smoker yet, because when it first starts, it's going to be creating somewhat of like a dirty smoke, and you don't really want that dirty smoke to get into the flavor of the meat. It's up to you on what wood pellets you want to use. There's some brands that are better than others. Maybe your smoker doesn't use pellets, maybe it actually uses wood. I'm a mesquite kind of guy. I like mesquite, right? The other one that's common is hickory, but right now I'm going to be using mesquite pellets. Okay, we're going to let this get up to temperature. This thing's going to start smoking, and after it starts smoking and I get clean smoke, in other words, the smoke that's coming out of the top doesn't look like it's coming out of an exhaust of a car, right? It starts looking clean. When that happens, I know I can go ahead and I can throw my ribs in there. Alright, so we got this preheated, we got clean smoke. Now we're going to go ahead and throw our ribs in there. And remember what I was saying about taking it, pushing them together like that. You're going to notice that I have got a thermometer inside there. That's the secret, guys and gals. So we're going to end up closing this up. We're not going to open it or touch it or anything until the internal temperature is 160, maybe 165, somewhere in that area. And then we'll go to the next step. But the thermometer is the secret. This whole 3-2-1 thing, does it work? Sure. Is it ideal? No. Because there's too many factors. When you go by internal temperature, you're going to end up seeing that you have a better result, as well as it does not take that long. We can have a set of perfect ribs around 3 hours, okay, as long as we're going by the probe. So let's close this up. We're not going to touch it for probably about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And as soon as that says 160, we're good to go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to end up prepping the second portion of the cook. If you're doing this in the oven, do the exact same thing. Now what I'm doing, is it necessary? Not really, but it does add a little bit more to the flavor profile of your ribs. So that is butter. Some people will add a little bit more of the dry rub if they still have some left over. I've got a little bit, so I'm just going to crush that up and place it on here. These are the crumbles I was telling you about of the brown sugar. There's a little seasoning in there, but that's okay. Once again, is all this stuff necessary? Not really, but it does add to the flavor of your ribs. It adds to the sweetness. Looky here. Looky here. Starting to look right. Okay. We're going to place this meat side down. I'm going to keep the probe in here because the next portion of the cooking, we need to bring it up to about 202 degrees. You may ask, hey Will, how long did it take you to get to this point where the internal was 160, 165? About an hour 15, maybe an hour and 20 minutes. Okay, so we're going to leave this in because that's important, and we are going to wrap this up. Right now the ribs are easily transported, so right now the ribs are not going to fall apart. Okay, by the time that we end up taking them out of here, when they reach 202, they're going to begin to start falling apart. We need that collagen to break down, and then that is temperature based. Okay, so we are going to put this back in the smoker or back in the oven. We're going to increase the temperature 280 degrees. Okay, and this might take another maybe hour. Now we're getting ready to do the final step. The internal temperature at this point is about 203. Okay. And this is really hot. There's going to be a lot of juice that shows up in this. We've been smoking it now for about 2 3/4 hours. Almost 3 hours. Okay. Now, whew, gotta watch out for that steam, Johnny. Now, you'll see that the bones are starting to protrude. If we let the temperature get hotter, okay, the internal temperature, if we let it get a little hotter, the meat would start falling off the bones. And we don't really want that. Now what we want to do is we want to put our barbecue sauce on. Today I'm just going to be using a store-bought barbecue sauce, but in one of my future videos I'll teach you how to make your own homemade. I've got a lot of good recipes for such things. And we are going to be putting this back in the smoker for about 20 minutes. Okay, and that's just to get some of this moisture off and to allow the barbecue sauce to become sticky. And the next time that we bring these in, they're going to be very close to fall off the bone. And there we go, guys. You can see that the bones are protruding, which is something that we want. It's not falling apart, but it will come apart, right? So if we grab one of these bones and we kind of just go like that, you can see that it comes right off the bone, right? So that way it's not completely falling off the bone where it's almost mushy. It's still got a little bit of bite, but it'll come off the bone easy. And then that's what we're looking for. If you want it to be fall off the bone, right? That temperature, instead of it being like 202, 203 before you go ahead and take it out and throw it back in with the barbecue sauce on it, get it up to about 206, 208, okay? And then that should be enough time and enough heat for that collagen to break down, where those bones are just going to end up sliding right off of there. The only thing is if you do that, it's going to be really hard to keep that thing together when you pull it off, okay? Now if you're cooking these in an oven, everything is the same. The only difference is that when you put your barbecue sauce on there, a lot of times the store-bought barbecue sauces already have a little bit of liquid smoke put in them. So it will give you a little bit of that smoky flavor. But you can put a little bit more liquid smoke inside your barbecue sauce to add even more to it and kind of get that right off of the grill flavor. You can see that cooked all the way through, still nice and juicy. Let's take a bite of it. Comes off no problem. But there you go, guys. Nice basic rib recipe. As long as you follow those temperatures, it's going to be really hard for you to fail. After you've made a rack of ribs, when you taste it, you can see where you need to change your dry rub to make it more to your liking. I generally will like my ribs where they're more fall off the bone. My wife prefers them where it kind of sticks a little to the bone, but it comes off the bone fairly easy. And that's what I did here. But if you like this video, hit like, hit subscribe, all that other good stuff. And until next time, talk to you later.